This is LauraJthe.Treetalker. Today I had a conversation with the upas tree, which is native to Southeast Asia and Australia, and is a relative of the mulberry tree. It wanted to talk about deception, or rather those who deceive, or pose as something they are not, and contrarily about discernment. It began by observing, one of the main problems I see with politics is that the larger percentage of politicians feel obliged to lie, or at least be evasive or non-committal, not much in the way of plain speaking. Why is that in your observation? I said. Well, it replied, when a person first becomes involved in social action, which is usually the precursor to getting into politics, they say what they really think. If that resonates with a lot of other people and they begin to think they would be a good person to represent a large group of the general public, they run for office. Unfortunately, your system, particularly, seems to require that a candidate spend vast amounts of money, which means they have to raise it all somehow. There are a few people who can rely on small donations from regular folks, but most candidates eventually have to go to people who are extremely wealthy or own corporations, and these people usually want an oversized voice as to what is to be legislated. Bang for the buck, so to speak. So I said, you see money in politics as the problem? More or less, it replied. Well, I said, well then, why don't we just eliminate it altogether? Good question, it said. Why don't you? Well, obviously, I said, the wealthy donors would lose their oversized megaphone and don't want to do that. So if you want their money, you end up working for their interests. And of course, it said, there's the corporations that do the actual airing of ads and interviews or debates on their media outlets. There's a lot of money required there too. And I presume a lot of money to be made as well. Right, I said. Gone are the days of whistle-stop campaign tours where the candidate spoke to whoever gathered at the back of a train to listen to him speak for a few minutes, till the train went on to the next little town. It's fascinating how reaching the voter has changed in the last 100 or so years, if you think of from that kind of thing to radio, to TV, to the internet, and now social media. Yes, indeed, it said. That sounds like an interesting topic in and of itself. Maybe I'll do a show on that another day, but now let's get back to deception and discernment. Then it said, it's all about getting what you want. The real issue is understanding what it is that you really want. In terms of politicians, it seems to be pretty easy for them to go off track, to go from wanting to represent their neighbors honestly and work for the benefit of the majority, to keeping the rich donors happy so you can do what? Keep the job? At some point, pretty early in their career, a politician should ask themselves if they are really keeping to their original intent, and if not, thus enters the problem of deception. The politician, if he relies on big donors who want something his neighbors do not, must, first of all, deceive himself about the path he's pursuing. If it's actually become more about himself and the benefits and perks of the job, he has to rationalize that. If he can do so, it's easier to justify deceiving the public. It's a very slippery slope. But the fault isn't just with the politician. Probably as he moves into his career, he realizes that not only are there a variety of valid points of view, but there's some juggling and bargaining that has to happen to achieve any results at all. Absolutely, I said. Compromise. The thing about democracies and republics is that nobody gets everything they want, but everybody gets some of what they want. Hopefully. And hopefully the most important thing, greater good and all that. It said, it also falls to his neighbors, the majority of whom voted for him, to be discerning. Their job as citizens is first of all to inform themselves of the facts of the issues they feel concern them, also of how the system of government basically works. The more you know, the more you'll be able to recognize when the ones who represent you are doing their job in good faith. If you don't make the time and effort to do that, then you'll start relying on hearsay, gossip, rumors, or people who actively wish to make you believe things that aren't true because you believing a lie would benefit them. It gets very convoluted. Frankly, it said, as an observer, I can't understand why any of you ever start lying at all. In the end, it seems to be more trouble than it's worth. Well, I said, psychology aside, I feel we're kind of rambling here, which is okay. But why did you feel that now was a good time to talk about counterfeiting, which was your first word to me this morning? It said, what we're seeing now is the sideshow, something to make us look away from what's really happening. The more shocking the show, the more people look at it. This is, I have to say, often pointed to by members of the press and many officials. While there are certain individuals that are given an inordinate amount of attention, because that is the nature of not only the media, but of the human attention span, and because shocking behavior is a form of entertainment. It's also a distraction. Look over here, pay attention to the clowns. Don't see what's really going on. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. It's so much easier to never grow up, to believe that there's some benevolent wizard or parent or God who will make everything better and relieve us of our burdens. Well, it isn't like that. In order to live in a place where things are fair, where people are honest, that place must be created, moment by moment, day by day, starting with personal small actions and giving of oneself what is expected from another. This is what government of the people, by the people, and for the people means. All are citizens and are equally responsible for what happens and for creating a better future. And that's what the Upas tree had to say today. If you enjoy hearing what the trees have to say to us, please like, subscribe, and share with your tree-loving friends. If you want to see some pictures of the tree, stick around for a few minutes. Otherwise, thanks for watching and have a great evening. Okay, pictures. Oh, it's still there. Good for me. All right, so I'm going to pull by the cord. This is the Upas tree. And I'd never heard of that before either. But it is, it's a big tree. It gets like 250 feet high. And there's several pictures of it in this position. I know this is not the best. I will post them on my community page. The good of the trunk. And there's a whole lot of drawings. This is apparently a very poisonous tree. And although the fruits are eaten, I find that very bizarre. But they are. Apparently, the sap that comes off its leaves and stuff have a toxin that can kill people. I might post something about that in my... Where'd you go? There. Why isn't this moving? It's supposed to move. Come on. Missed some stuff. Okay. Anyways, this is some of the fruits and leaves and stuff. And this is a picture of the inside of the fruit. So people eat it. I don't know. There we go. There. Okay, and this is a great illustration. This is called, the Black Upas Tree of Wall Street. And you'd have to look really closely, but there's all kinds of things written on those little leafy things, such as bribes for editors, bribes for judges, bribes for Congress, bribes for legislation, bribes for lawyers. Good God, it goes on and on. So I guess that Wall Street. See, now this was, I guess, in the 19th century when everybody was doing bad things. Well, like, gee, like they're not doing them now. Anyway, so I did think it was a really interesting subject, the whole thing of what has happened with elections and campaigns and stuff. Because when the whistle stop campaigns, these went on really, I think Lincoln did those, or probably before that. They would get on these trains and they would go all over the United States. They'd start in the East Coast and they'd go all the way down like California and up the coast and then come back in. And they, for whatever reason, on these routes that I could see, they skipped the Southeast for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe because it was right after the Civil War and they didn't want to go down there. What a mess. Anyway, so there was that. And then radio was invented in like 1890 something like that, and then so the first radio program was that ever aired was 1910, and after that, and like I'd have to look this up now, but what happened was that people immediately started putting out news, and which is fine. And then by say 1933 or something, 75% of American households had a radio. And FDR used to do these fireside chats, and this was the first time that politicians made direct contact with the populace, and it made a huge difference. So people really loved him because he was talking to them. Of course, there were other forces doing the same thing from the other side of the fence. There was also this Catholic priest that Rachel Maddow talks about in her latest book. Was it prequel? Whatever. Anyway, but she talks about how there was this Catholic priest that half the country listened to him all the time, and he wanted America to stay out of the war. He thought Hitler was great, so all this kind of thing. Anyway, so after TV happened, and that was a whole different gig. I remember as a kid seeing the Nixon-Kennedy debates, and it is possible that as a politician, Nixon knew more about things, because Kennedy his family has always been in politics, but in terms of that kind of thing, Nixon had been around a lot longer. But he just did not come across well on TV. He sweated and stuttered, and he was awful. And Kennedy looked cool and calm and slick and handsome. So that was that. And Nixon always felt like he'd been robbed, that he should have won this election because, he knew so much more. But now, it almost doesn't matter what's on TV or radio because of social media and stuff. So it's an interesting subject, and I might look in and see some details about it, or post that somewhere too, but I don't know. Anyway, so that's it from this tree, and I hope you have a nice afternoon, and I will see you again another time for another tree. Bye.